right. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of our Puget Systems live Q&A show. This week we're joined by Sir Wade.
Hello.
Wow, I kind of just like suddenly lost my voice for a second there. 3D animation, VFX, and content creator, all around cool guy. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm kind of excited to touch on a topic that we missed during our live stream extravaganza, the freelance independent sort of angle for animators, content creation, and in general. But just in case anybody doesn't already know, which I would be surprised if they didn't, go ahead and give yourself a little introduction, who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sir Wade. And yeah, so all the things he said, I do. My main thing is YouTube. I do a lot of educational content for people aspiring and aspirationally and professionally doing animation. I have a little bit of a background in the industry, I'm no veteran. So most of my content is sort of my journey creatively, figuring out what the heck to do, how to do things, and so on. So it's sort of a mix of like, sometimes it's rig reviews for animators, sometimes it's tech and gear stuff. Hardware is something I've been trying to get more into because I love tech, and it kind of works because Puget's a tech company, so it's like, the land interest. Tutorials, things like that. Just, exploring all the different things that are related to art and animation, which is pretty much a lot of stuff. So, that's
just a little. Okay, cool. Nice. Well, thank you. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So I know a little bit that you had worked with DreamWorks, and that I think is where is that where a lot of your animation experience comes from, or was there a little bit before that and then?
Industry-wise, DreamWorks is the full like. So I went to school for computer science, and then I basically left the regular school system, did Animation Mentor, which is an online animation school. And if you go there, tell them I sent you. But I did that, and then so my training was industry-based because the school is based around all your mentors are people who work in the industry. The curriculum is created by people who, the three founders worked at, I think at the time they founded it was Pixar and ILM they worked at.
Cool.
And so they knew what needed to be taught and built a school with their coworkers and friends and peers to help people actually learn the stuff. So that was the beginning there. Worked at DreamWorks as a trainer for like 2-ish years, and then went off on my own. So, and then have, had contact with tons of people and various studios and projects and things. So I've been around the industry since then, but my work experience has all been at DreamWorks.
Okay, cool. And is it more 2D, like I guess traditional, like cartoons and stuff, or was it more? And I know now you seem to focus a lot more on 3D, but the past, was it a little mix?
Pretty much always 3D for me.
Okay.
I like to draw, but I'm not very good at it. Well, I can do like doodles and cartoons and stuff, but like as far as 2D animation is concerned, like that takes a mastery that I have not achieved. So I've always leaned 3D.
That's interesting. I would, I don't know, my gut would have been like there'd be a progression, like 2D, and then okay, you got to figure out how to make this look almost 3D, and then you jump into like actual modeling and stuff. But that's interesting to hear.
Lucky for a lot of us, you don't need both skill sets. Yeah, sort of different. I guess different paths you can take. Like stop motion is its own thing. 3D 2D. VR animation is a thing that I feel like really VR is weird because VR you can actually kind of do all three of them within VR. VR is just like there are 3 ways to animate in VR, and that's to do it kind of 2D, 3D, or stop motion within the context. Anyway, I could geek out about that, but
no, that's okay.
Yeah, luckily they don't have to blend.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it. My first question is like, what inspired you to go out and trek on your own? What was it that finally was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this by myself?
Well, it's funny because I'm very fortunate in that I get to say like, oh yeah, I got hired out of school to DreamWorks as a trainer. My first job in the industry was one of the big 3. Usually it's like Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks. That's not normal. That's whenever I like speak at schools and stuff, and people ask me like, what was your first job? Usually most people's first job is some like smaller studio or a project or something, and I'm just like, oh yeah, DreamWorks. But I always have to preface that or caveat that with like, hey, that's not normal, so like don't feel weird about that. I got very lucky. But there was sort of a thing that happened is when you work at lots of smaller studios, like I know a lot of people who that's what they did. And so they'd travel all over. You know, you'd work at a studio in London and then Montreal, and then you go over here to New Zealand, and then you maybe work in LA, you work in Vancouver, and there's all these places you can go in different projects. And the big studios are the biggest studios that DreamWorks is in California, Pixar's in California, Disney's in California. So I kind of started with a big one, and I was there for a while, and it was sort of this idea that like, well, because my goal as a student was always like, I want to work at a studio like that. And then I was there, so it was like, there was no progression. Obviously, there was still tons of stuff to grow. Like there was progression to be had, but as far as like most of the times when you work at a smaller studio, you go there and you learn everything you can, and then if you still have other things you want to go, you work at a job for a year or two, and then you're like, I now want to try this, and then you go work over here, and you go over here.
Yeah.
But being at DreamWorks, I recognized pretty quickly, like, if I get a job in animation here, I'm never gonna leave. Like, I'm never gonna like willingly choose to, at the time I was like, I'm never gonna go anywhere. And so it was sort of this thing where I was there for 2 years, and in the role I had, which was not an artist role, I did kind of hit the ceiling of what I was going to be learning. I was still learning things here and there, but the growth of learning had tapered. And it was like, well, I can transition to animation and probably never leave, for a long time, or I can do something different and sort of go back to what I missed. And what I missed was that like figuring it out, more kind of guerrilla filmmaking mentality of like, I want to work on smaller projects and things and kind of see how that goes, because the studio will always be here. Will the opportunities to do my own thing always be there? I don't have kids. I was recently married at the time. I didn't have any big obligations that like I had to stay there. So I was like, I kind of think now is the time for me to go off on my own. I want to try freelance. I want to see if I can do it and, take advantage of the state of the internet with social media and things like that. Can I build a career, or at least can I just give this a shot and not have anything bad happen? So that was kind of the timing part of it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, take advantage of the lack of responsibilities, I guess, and obligation. Like that's smart. Yeah. I kind of goofed around in my 20s too, because I knew where I wanted to be eventually, and so I tried a bunch of stuff when I was young as well to try stuff. That's cool.
It's the time to do it.
Yeah, right. Because if you make a mistake or something, it's nothing so catastrophic that you can't find a way out of it eventually. So that's kind of where my head was at. We got a question from YouTube. Will we see a review of MacBook M1 Pro Max compared to other laptop desktop CPUs? I don't know if that's directed toward me as a representative of Puget or you as a...
We can both answer.
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. I would love to do more Apple reviews. I'm trying to get more into tech reviews, and I specifically want to do like a PC versus Mac, like top shelf, expensive stuff, like what's better, blah, blah, blah. But Apple computers are expensive, and I don't currently have the budget for it. So as much as I'd love to do that, if I can get some sponsor who's like, yeah, we'll pay for an Apple computer, cool. But like, as it stands, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's similar for Puget as well. Because I think the M1 Max is like $3,000
starting price. Yeah.
And because Puget focuses on PCs, workstation towers, like we don't even sell the desktop replacement laptops that we used to. It would be a nice to have, but like Sir said, they're wicked expensive, and it would be nice for the content, but it doesn't really target the people we were trying to attract, really. Especially laptops in a general sense are not as capable as, even sticking with inside the Apple ecosystem, their laptops are not equal to their desktops. And so that's it. Mr. AE4D says, hello everyone, love my Puget PC, modeled it after Sir Wade's. Awesome. Thank you. Great to hear that.
Thank you.
What's been I hope so too. No, I'm pretty sure if he got one like yours, they probably do.
Oh yeah. Quick tangent. I know you have another question for me. Like, just on that note, I'm not that I'm here to like Puget, but like for real though, I'm kind of spoiled. I do things. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm like giving, I do my mentorship over on Patreon or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, so if you do this thing, it'll speed it up, or let's crank this setting here, and people are like, I can't turn my setting onto that. I'm like, Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, let me just and then and even when I turn my stuff all the way down, it still runs great. I'm like, oh, it's fast for me, and they're like, I'm not a laptop man.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. I love to hear it though. That's yeah, man. And well, that'll go down a whole different path. I'll ramble on. Yeah. Um, what was a big early on, especially, and I'll dive into a little more detailed question, but what's something that stands out as a bit of a stumbling block when you first made the move to like, okay, I'm done, I'm out of here, let's go.
to freelance, I think the biggest
Yeah.
thing was like, where the heck do you get work? I had no idea where to get work, and I didn't know anybody who was doing freelance. Well, like, really not. I only knew like one or two people, and so I tried all those websites, the whatever insert site here that you Google, and you're like, how to get freelance work, and give you like freelancer.com or Upworthy or whatever the heck the things and apps, and none of those worked for me. Like I signed up to everything and did all my filter stuff, and every time I found anything that was like kind of close, it was usually like super underpaid or not paid at all, and it never was a fit. Not even close. It wasn't even, nothing I would even consider. And
Yikes.
yeah, it was really rough. And the closest I could find was like Craigslist. Like I was on Craigslist looking for like gigs and stuff. There's people like,
That's
hey, look,
weird.
I've got this web series. We can give you credit. And like, I can't. Like animation takes forever. Like that's what I was trying to do, is like character animation and things like that. And actually, I do have a funny story. The first potential gig that came into my inbox, which I guess segues into a different thing, was like my inbox was my only lead generator for a while because of YouTube, which we can talk about. But something funny that happened is I had this company reach out, never heard of them. I don't know where they were based. I don't remember. But they reached out and they're like, hey, like we have this commercial. We need animation. It needs to be like a 2-minute thing. We've got a budget. And I think their budget was like, if I can remember, it was a couple $1,000s. It was below the $10,000 threshold, but it was a couple $1,000. I was like, wow, that's sweet. That sounds good. Looking back, it was really underpaid for what they were looking for. 2 minutes of multiple character, full animation, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't just animation. It was like everything. Because I thought it was just going to be like, oh, cool, like animation. But the thing that caught my eye is it was supposed to be like a Marvel commercial. It was like, hey, like we're selling like, I think it was like air conditioning units or something. It was something very industrial.
Okay.
And it was like, oh, we want this thing where we're in the Stark Tower, Tony and Bruce Banner are hanging out. Conversation goes back and forth. Hulk gets mad because of something Tony says, like, no, we can't do that with clean energy or something. And then Hulk like jumps out the window, breaks through the thing, comes back, slams it down like, oh. And then it's like, yeah, that's the product. So he was supposed to like, there's a whole Iron Man suit up, the Hulk transformation, destruction effects.
Wow.
I was like, this sounds amazing. Like, I'd love to like do this. I was like, okay, great. Like, this sounds really cool. Send me the rigs, or, if we need to, like, if you have the models and we can get them rigged. Because in my head, like, having friends who worked at Disney, who owns ILM, who owns Marvel, like, I know that the process is like assets are provided by Marvel, and then you kind of work within the constraints of, their brand guidelines and stuff. And anyways, they're just like, oh yeah, we don't have any. I'm like, wait a minute, red flag. And ultimately, long story short, they were like, no, you need to like create the models, which I don't do. I'm not a modeler or a rigger, or just buy something off like TurboSquid or something. I'm like, oh, wait a second. This does not sound legit. This is like all kinds of legal licensing and issues. Sorry if you can hear the siren.
Okay.
But I should have turned on NVIDIA.
That's Disney
Arcade
coming
Plus.
after you for.
Yeah, I don't need Mickey Mouse's lawyers coming after me. So I was pretty quick to be like, could I have done it, made some money, and like made it work? Maybe, but that is not a risk I was willing to take. And I'm so glad that no.
Wow, man. So I imagine then the landscape. I mean,
Oh, is that my internet? Okay, I'm
Oh.
back. Hello,
we're
what's
back.
up?
Okay. How long have you been all by yourself, freelance or independent?
When did I leave? I think beginning of 2018. So three going on 4 years, I think.
Cool. Right on. So imagine then the landscape for finding work is better now, right?
A bit. I don't do much freelance these days. It's almost all YouTube, which I like. But
Hey, that's great.
yeah, but definitely it evolved. if anyone was like hoping for an answer to that, like, oh yeah, I can never find work, and someone's like, please tell us how you found work. The answer to that was really through connections, and I didn't have very many, but the few people I knew who were doing freelance and independent projects, it was they knew I could do certain things, and so they'd say, hey, like, do you have any bandwidth to help with like this one thing? And at first it was boring stuff. It was like, hey, can you, we have this product footage of I don't know, some product, and like there's like staples that need to be removed from it, and I was just like, okay, that's a quick After Effects. At the time it was a couple hours of work. Now it's like literally 20 minutes because you've got the new, the content aware fill. That would have just done. But it was little stuff like that, and that grew and grew into bigger projects, and nothing character animation from that avenue. But that's where I got a lot of the bulk of my work, was just people I knew. And that, if you don't have those people, comes from like just making the stuff that you want to create and then putting it somewhere online and trying to share it that way, because no one's going to book you for jobs and no one's going to reach out to you unless they can see that you do certain things.
Sure.
So if you want to do something involving, I don't know, something, do that thing and show that you can do it as if it were a real project. And then when people see it, they're like, oh, that person's good at this. So I don't know.
You mentioned that you are a character animator, and that sounds very specific, which then implies that there are different kinds of animators. Could you elaborate a little bit? Like, where does your specialty fit into, like, I wish I had a better understanding to give an example of, say, I don't know, like a Pixar movie. Usually you're the character animator. What does that mean? And then how does that fit into the broader scope of a project like that?
Sure. I guess there's kind of two ways to look at it. If you look at it from the like animation industry pipeline perception versus like kind of how normal people look at it.
Sure.
If you look at it from the industry side, there's games, there's TV, there's movies, and so on, different kinds of projects, and everything has its different pipeline. Like games animation is very different than film animation, just because of the tools you're using and the way things work. Like if you're a games animator, you're animating everything in place, and they rotate and stuff on the spot because the player moves the character thing. But in feature film, you don't have to do that, so you just move the character around the scene. So there's like different ways you work. But
okay,
you've got all the different jobs. You've got storyboarding and the modeler and the rigger. And at bigger studios, those are separate people, separate jobs. At the smaller studios, you may wear more hats. So you may need to model and rig, or rig and animate or something. But within the context of all that, the character animator is the actor of the digital performance. They're the in feature, it's not, depending on the studio, it's not generally using motion capture. In games, it is all the time, usually because you have so much work to do, and it's a great tool to speed things up. In some studios, they do use it for, it's just always up to different things. But trying to condense so much information into one answer. But yeah, the character animator is like the actor, the puppet master, because it's just it's just a digital puppet.
Sure.
And so sometimes at different studios that involves the cloth, the hair. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's simulation's job. That's either character effects. Sometimes that's just the effects department themselves. They usually handle effects, explosions, water, footsteps, wind, things like that. Wow. And there's there's so many people in the process just to do one thing. But then if you look at it from kind of the regular person perspective, whenever they see an animated movie, they just think animator, and they kind of just group all of those things into one. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing is to say, well, no, there's like lighters and there's compositors and there's like all the different pieces. But then just within animation, you have, and it depends on the studio, on whether or not you'd actually have all these different classifications, but often you'll have crowd animator, which is someone who does a lot of cycles, kind of like games, actually, where they kind of do a lot of the in-place, repeatable things, different variations, because you have, tons of background characters that need work. Sometimes that's motion capture to help it out. Sometimes it's hand-keyed, but crowd animators usually handle the cycles that get applied to the crowds with some kind of AI brain. Mm-hmm. There's the character animators, who are that kind of the actor thing for the characters or the creatures or the whatever. Sometimes you have technical animators, which will focus more on like vehicles and cars. They don't have that at DreamWorks, but I've learned of that one, which is super cool.
Wow.
Fixed animators is the thing they have at Pixar, which is just like, it's usually a more entry-level position where it's like, hey, we can't give you a whole shot yet, but go into other people's work, and if we need, the script said this, the dialogue had this, the animator completed and finalized the shot, it's done, but then something changed down the line. We changed this word, had the actor re-record it, and we just need the lip sync adjusted for, broccoli is now carrots or something.
Okay.
And so then the fixed animator, it's like, okay, well, the original animator is busy with a bigger shot. Go fix that shot, just, fix the mouse shapes or something, different things. So I think that's usually the thing. But the very last piece of all that, sorry for such a long answer.
No, it's good.
Is that when I say character animator, it's because I'm hoping to work with actual characters and have like body mechanics and acting and like facial animation and stuff like that. When most people on the internet are like, I do animation, they're usually not talking about that stuff because that stuff's hard. It requires training and practice.
Hard.
Like it's a pain in the butt. It's so tedious sometimes, and it's really rough because you have to, convey all these things. But you can also just like animate text and animate. Look, and not that stuff's not hard. Like there's also, there's subtleties and things you can add. But it's sort of a different subset of the scale of the craft to be able to do character animations. Like you can learn animation as a broad sense, but character animation is sort of specific, and creature animation is its own thing, and stuff like that. So I usually like to say character animator because it gives me sort of a distinction to say like I'm a trained animator and I'm able to do characters where some people are not.
Sure.
Not that they're not better than me at like way better at other things, but characters are where I can stand out.
That's cool. It's funny you mentioned text because we have another question from Mr. AE4D. He says, do studios take care of title animations or is that outsourced?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the studio. Usually the stuff's done in-house. Well, as far as like DreamWorks, Pixar, Disney, those kinds of things. For their movies, that's usually in-house. Like we had an After Effects department at DreamWorks. There's only a couple of people, and I don't think it was their full-time thing. I think it was, actually, I'm not sure if that's true. I don't know if it was full-time, but yeah, for titles and 2D stuff that used After Effects, like the Kung Fu Panda, the intro of Kung Fu Panda 1, 2, and 3, there's like a 2D stuff, which is like hand-drawn in Photoshop, put into After Effects with some puppet tool and different things. There's a department that kind of handles that, text, things like that. And I'm going to turn on on broadcast because there's a lot of car noises.
It's all right.
Let me see, microphone. Let's see the magic of the RTX cards here. Let's see, default device. I need my chat mic, noise removal, and then I come to the thing. Sorry, I'm narrating, and mic.
We're doing it live. I love it.
Where is the NVIDIA? Okay, how's that?
I think you did it.
Sweet. So if you hear me and no sirens, it's working.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm never not amazed at how well the RTX voice / NVIDIA broadcast AI thing works. It's incredible.
So cool.
Yeah, I've seen videos, in particular one by a guy Barnacles. He's got like a box fan, a leaf blower, and he's like pounded on his desk all at the same time, and not a lick of it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So at this point, your freelance independent work, your educational work is its own sort of company, right?
Yeah. I have an LLC and everything.
Okay. Was there any man, how did you go about that? Starting a business is no joke. I've looked into it on my own on a personal side, and like just the official forming of it was interesting and a little complicated. But are there anything that stands out as particular to being an educator or anything specific to the animating and that and starting a business around that you weren't expecting?
Well, it's expensive. It's definitely not worth doing until it's worth doing. Just like filing the LLC fees and stuff like that. But I guess there were a few unexpected things. One thing, I guess a pro and a con. One good thing that with the, again, another expensive thing and stuff, to work with certain vendors, or to be a vendor for certain companies. I've done some projects with Autodesk as an example. Autodesk is a massive company, as people know. If you look at Maya, which is what I use, Maya is part of the media and entertainment stuff. division of Autodesk, which is I think like 2% of the Autodesk company, and
Oh,
Maya
wow.
is like one of like 27 programs or whatever it is. So like Maya is tiny within this, which is also tiny. So it's a big company, and their relationship with me, I'm like, I'm a small fish. But to work with a company like Autodesk directly required business insurance. I actually, because I want to be paid as a business entity,
Mhm.
and to have kind of a direct, like Autodesk as a company pays my company, you have to have business insurance because companies like that don't like the liability of having companies like, what if there's an issue? What if there's a problem? Blah, blah, blah. So had I not had all that set up, I mean, I'm sure there's a way that it happens. Like I know not everybody who works with Autodesk has to have all that stuff set up. Like I think there's a different way it happens, but the way I wanted to do business very officially and everything, and to work with certain things like Autodesk, big companies, having the whole business thing set up worked really well because they're like, oh, you need to have this insurance, and so I had to go get that insurance to then become a vendor in their system and things
Wow.
like that. Which I wish I knew more about, like if I didn't have it, what would happen, and like
Sure.
would that have limited me to? I think it would have limited me to work with them in the capacity that I do to a certain extent. Like
Okay.
I don't know, like certain projects I'm doing that I see as like, oh, there's a big project. I don't know if the project could have been as big as it is without it. I'm not sure.
Huh. That's cool.
Um,
It's cool to hear that they kind of directed you a little bit on that instead of just saying, "Oh, you don't have this? We'll go to somebody else."
oh yeah,
Is that did you already have a bit of a good relationship with them before that, or is it they were just very helpful because they're cool like that?
they're just cool like that. It's funny because I've actually talked to them about this. Autodesk is a massive company, and a lot of the comments I get, because I'm, you see the software wars, which I don't like. The software wars of like Maya versus Blender and Max and all the people.
Mhm.
And often people are very vocal about, not wanting to spend money, which is fair. But usually they're very like, Autodesk is a giant company, corporation, blah, blah, blah. It's like, sure. But the team who runs Maya is great. Like they're so nice, and they're trying to make the product better and work with it and do all this kind of stuff. And so, you know, despite the perception of like these big companies, like faceless companies who don't care, it's like, no, the people who work at these big companies, like, yeah, the company is like, they have their boards and their shareholders, and like, sure, granted, but the people are great, and they're so helpful, and they're so nice, and they really want people to succeed and just like have fun using the things. And what's funny is, I think they originally got in touch with me. I didn't have a pre-existing relationship with them really. They reached out to me because they saw my YouTube videos, and I think they saw whatever they saw from Maya, but they also saw my Blender content, which is funny. And I was like embarrassed. I'm like, oh, sorry about that. They're like, no, it's cool. Like people use different tools, and we know that. Like that's the thing that I think the software wars get wrong. Is it's like, no, I will never use this tool because you have to pay for it. I'd rather just use this for everything. It's like, that's fine, but not every tool is good at everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing as a freelancer, you really have to accept that, like, you got to learn a lot of things, from all the way down to like, yeah, I got to have like invoicing and like you have all of those things, overhead, like work stuff. But then it's like, yeah, if you need to do simulation at like a really high level, which I don't usually have to do, it's like, you might need to learn Houdini, or maybe you can get by with Blender, or maybe you can use Cinema 4D, or maybe you can use Maya. But you'll probably be jumping between tools a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that comes in at a lot of different angles too, like with Adobe versus whatever other, Resolve, let's say.
Yeah.
It's just there's a reason there are all these different tools, and that is smart. That's smart. Man, that's cool. Oh, I lost where I was going to lead into another one. I'm so sorry.
That's all good. I keep going on these like very comprehensive tangential answers
No.
where I'm like, I don't remember the question, but I answered a lot of things. I hope it was
I
in there.
love it. No, it's great. It's good insight, because I feel like with the way the landscape, and I mean just like in general, content creation and social media and all this stuff has provided such an opportunity for people to kind of make it on their own. And if every little bit, you might not note it, but there's going to be nuggets in there that people are going to appreciate. So, which actually that is kind of a good tangent to kind of go on into. I'm curious how you feel about some of like the different channels. People tend to like rag on TikTok, or Instagram is the only thing. Do you have a preferred, like, I know you're on YouTube, the social links at the bottom of your webpage, I think you're everywhere.
I am
Literally, I think
everywhere. I don't
um,
post everywhere very often, but I'm there.
yeah. How do you feel about how social media and the Web 2.0 thing has changed everything?
Well, as far as like creatively and like trying to like make, both to make cool things and share it and to get opportunities from that, which can potentially lead into freelance, like in all the kind of different realms that I'm in it, it's like you can feel how you feel about social media and various platforms personally, and that's fine. Like I don't really like Facebook. I don't enjoy it. I don't use it hardly ever. It's there. I have a profile, and occasionally I'm required to post there for like a brand thing. Like sure,
Sure.
I don't really like Facebook. Um, and some people don't like TikTok and things like that. Like that's fine. Like I feel like professionally, like if you're trying to use this stuff, it's like it's silly to hate on a platform. Like, I know a lot of people are really like, oh, TikTok, that's for kids and Gen Z and like all the dance. Like I know there's a perception around it. And I think when the platform first started, I mean, back when it was Musically that TikTok acquired and kind of integrated, I remember thinking Musically was like I was guilty of that. Like Musically was dumb. Like what is this? But despite that, doesn't matter how I feel about it, people were making money on, Musically, and people were growing followings and building a platform. And when that got acquired into TikTok, and that was then just TikTok doing its thing, same thing. I was kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I don't get it. But doesn't matter if I don't get it, if I don't like it, like people use it. It builds opportunity. It does all this cool stuff for them. And eventually I downloaded it to be like, okay, well, let me just learn it because I have this. Hopefully, if you have this habit as well, you get introspective about it, and you like. I have this habit where I'll look at a thing and I'll have an initial like, that looks dumb, and then for a long time I won't look at it again until eventually I think about, I'm like, why do I think it's dumb? Because I don't get it. Like, there's no reason why I think it's dumb. I've just seen certain things and it's given me this perception, but like, doesn't mean I'm right. So I need to look at it more critically, explore it for myself, come up with my own opinions, which is just like a good practice in general. And so I downloaded TikTok, and of course, it doesn't know what to serve me for the first week. I'm just like,
Right.
what is all this? Like, I don't understand how it works, the context of the platform, the way that people communicate with like the caption. Like, I didn't get it. And my wife and I both, she got it first. She was looking at it. She's like, you should get TikTok. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I don't get it. She was trying to explain it to me. I'm getting older. And
Hey, I'm there too.
after like a week, I was like, oh, I get it. Like, it's just like a different language. It's just like, some people get it quicker. And anyway, once I understood it, I love TikTok now. That's great. Like I lose way too much time on it. But as a platform, each one has their benefits. Each one has their own merits and like what they're good for. And they're not all good for everything. But like,
Sure.
if you are trying to build a freelance career, or if you are trying to build any kind of online presence, and you're like down on TikTok, I can just say objectively, you are incorrect in this belief, because whether or not you like it is your call, but whether or not it's a good idea for you to be there is objectively, you need to be there. You need to have a TikTok, you need to have a presence, you need to be posting more than I'm posting. Like I'm not exactly practicing, but like let me check. Let me tell you this. I got on TikTok forever ago, and I've only posted 7 TikToks.
Okay.
If you want to follow me there, I'm at Sir Wade. I have posted
with or without the FX.
Without the FX.
Okay.
Good catch. My first TikTok didn't do very well at first. It just kind of went there and nothing really happened. It's me wiping out on a one wheel and actually breaking my arm, which is funny. You don't see the break. It cuts right before I hit the ground, but I was holding a 360 camera when I fell, and so it pauses. It's like, uh-oh. It's funny. The other ones, I posted some animations. The next 5 are animations, and one of them has 671,000 views. One of them has 74,000 views. One's 268,000 views. One's 25,000 views, and one's 568,000 views. And I had no following on the platform. The organic reach is off the charts, and it will not be that way forever. So if you're trying to build a following or get awareness around a product or a service that you can provide, you need to be there, making content consistently and just getting better at it.
Don't let my boss hear that, man. I got enough channels I have to deal with. But I agree. I'm right there with you as a social media person, as my work, and also just an enthusiast in my private life. Yeah, I totally agree. It's not just teens dancing and stuff like that. It is a tremendous platform for whatever kind of genre of content you want to produce. It's good.
Yeah, and everybody's there. There's like young people, obviously. There's tons of old people. who do very well. Everyone loves old people.
Yeah. Oh man.
There's so much educational content on TikTok. I've learned so much on TikTok. It's crazy.
I imagine then it could be then very beneficial for your own,
I'm sure it would be if I posted more.
quick little 1 minute, tip. Well, I think they max at 3 now. You can do a 3-minute video now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just seriously go check it out. It's really cool. Let's see. Oh, that's just regular comments. I'm curious, since basically you're your own boss, nobody's telling you what to do. Nobody, breathing down your neck for projects and things. How do you structure a day? What does the day in the life of Sir Wade look like?
Historically, very unorganized, which is not great. I would break it up into I'll try to go through this really quickly, but I break it into 4 kind of like chunks of time. When I first started, it was sort of this inconsistent thing I just kind of do whenever. When I would I'm going to make videos, I'm going to make whatever. When I first started working for myself, it was very just like whenever I had an idea, I'd go act on the idea. Otherwise, I just kind of more or less plan things and write things down and make lists. And it was productive. It's not productive. I'd be wasting time and not really being what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I wasn't
productive, I guess.
I guess nothing I was doing was on purpose, I guess. Purposeful.
Oh,
I suppose.
Intent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nothing. It didn't feel intentional, what I was doing. And that wasn't great. And then the second phase was when I was I'm going to have a commitment to, because it's sort of the idea that I saw TikTok on this yesterday. When you have a boss, or you have some kind of person you have obligations to, and they say, hey, work on this project, do this thing, hit this deadline, you do it, or you try your best to do it. But when you are I'm going to do this thing, and very often you don't, why is that? It's well, you respect the boss, but you don't have that same respect for yourself as an authority for yourself, which is, I found that really interesting. Gave it a little heart, saved it for later. But that's sort of a thing where you have to you have to show up for yourself. You have to show up to work, even if to work, you have to treat it like a job. You have to think of it like a job. You have to really try to work as if it were a thing you were going to. And so for phase 2, I was I'm going to post once a week or whatever it was. I think it was once a week. I'm going to post once a week on, say, Monday, Tuesday if I need another day. And I gave myself a little bit of flexibility because I knew that not every time I'm going to hit it. And I did. For probably 80% of the year, I was able to do it every week. Hey. And then phase 3, actually in this space that you're seeing behind me, this is the house in Texas that we went, from California. I went to Texas for a year and a half. Just moved to LA, so this is all a lie. But psych, got him. For this area, I never really set up shop. I never actually set up my work environment. It looks cool on camera, but the physical space I'd walk into, it didn't feel like I was in work. It just felt like a room in my house, and I never really had that separation between work and home. Sure. So I was never able to get into work mode and be I'm at work, time to get stuff done, show up for myself, do the things, and then when I'm done, leave, recharge. I was always in this middle wishy-washy so that's where you burn out, is where you're you can never relax because you're always kind of working, but you can never really work because you're also kind of relaxing and not really focused. That's forward to phase 4, where I am now. I've just rented my own office space for the first time. So I'm actually in an office where it's I come here at 9 a.m. and I have a start time for I work for myself. Work from home has always been for the last 5 years, I've been working from home, 4 or 5 years. But now work from home is now I have an office. I'm going to come here, I'm going to do my work, and then I'm going to leave, turn off my brain, and just, have those bounds, which I forgot your original question, but hopefully that somehow.
Yeah, a little bit. And then so now you have your office space, but then how do you structure your day, the time?
Right.
What do you decide to work on, and how does that all work?
So when things are going productively, the way that I'm usually keeping track of it is I'm sort of a blend between calendar blocking, I really like, and task list stuff. There's a few techniques I use. So one technique I learned about was the Pomodoro technique, which if I remember it correctly, I only use it sometimes. It's sort of when you have a task you don't want to work on and you give yourself an egg timer or your phone timer or something, you put a timer on, ideally a timer that doesn't require you going onto your phone, seeing notifications, getting distracted, but having an actual physical something that you turn on and say, all right, I'm going to just work on this for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do it, but I'm just going to give myself 30 minutes to get some stuff done, and then I can call it done. I can take a break and do something else. And usually what happens is you get into the flow by the time 30 minutes ends. You either take a break or you've gotten into it and you give yourself another. No, I'm going to keep going. And then you're productive. But in general, I block out my calendar. I have kind of a task list of things I want to get done. I know you're supposed to start with the hardest things and work towards the easiest. I don't always follow that, but for me, it's sort of in the morning. I start with admin, and I've got this block in my calendar that's like emails and admin. And I have to give myself an end time to that because I'm so slow at emails. I will spend all day replying to 7 emails, which is awful. So once, whatever time it is on my calendar, like 11:30, once email time is over, I don't touch my emails. I don't look. I close the tabs. I turn my phone on the focus mode, and I'm not allowed to check. And then I work on whatever it is next. It might be writing the next video. It might be testing a product. It might be, right now since I'm moving in, it's like physically setting up lights and stuff. Kind of doing those things. I have a lunch break because lunch breaks are important. Give yourself a break to eat and live. But in general, it's sort of a mix between maybe there's some animation in there. Maybe it's writing a video, outlining stuff, making sure I have all the things. Maybe it's screen capturing all the stuff for that video. Other times it's just recording the actual tutorial content. I had an editor who now has an animation job, so claps for her. But now I'm without an editor, so unfortunately, a big old block of editing is going to be added back into my calendar soon, which I'm not looking forward to.
Oh, bummer.
But so if any editors are watching this who are better than I am at editing, I'm looking to hire someone better than me, which is probably not the bar is not super high. It's just I don't want to train anybody. So hey, if you can just edit in Premiere, hit me up.
Yeah. Where would they go to contact you?
They could go to my website, sirwade.com. There's a contact page. You just
there you go.
Send me a thing.
Cool. Yeah. Well, hopefully we can help you out with that a little bit. That's kind of cool. Because I know I asked that because even in my own work, I do have a boss and tells me and stuff, but a lot of it is somewhat vague for me. I have goals to hit, but how I get there is very vague. And so that was kind of a personal question, but also I imagine it's very difficult for someone who comes from a traditional sort of work environment to then look and see, man, I want to do all this stuff, but how do I get there? That's do you have any sort of an accountability group, or somebody, friends or something that kind of hold you to, your wife perhaps, that says hey, you gotta stay up on this sort of thing?
I wish. My wife's probably the closest person I have to that. I try not to burden her with all my work stuff all the time, but she's a YouTuber too, so we both are really comfortable with how it all works, and we'll tell each other oh, I've got this project, I've got this deadline, and so we'll kind of keep each other on it. She has an assistant, so that works really well for her because if she doesn't do her work, her assistant doesn't have work to do, so she's got to keep the flow. I don't have an accountability partner, and since there's not that many people in my space on YouTube, there's not that many people to get feedback from. Mm-hmm. I have my animator friends for animation feedback, and I have plenty of photo video friends if I had work that had to do with that stuff. But when it comes to educational content for animation, there's only a couple of people I know. I do have a couple, but I don't run stuff by them very often because it's here, watch this 25-minute video every week. That's no. But no, I don't have that many people. It's kind of a lonely job, freelance and YouTube. That's something I think a lot of people don't realize. Some people really like that, and that can be a really cool thing because it's just I'm just gonna do my thing. But it can also be you can miss coworkers. You can miss having that kind of culture and environment to surround yourself with. So it is important to try to find people to connect with. It's a little weird in my case just because I'm doing something so specific and sort of new on the platform, I suppose. But it's growing, which is nice. But yeah, it's a thing that people don't talk about.
I feel like a lot of behind the scenes stuff doesn't get talked about a lot when it comes to content creation. Like you had mentioned earlier, the general public sees animation as all of the things combined into one little nugget, and there's so much nuance to it. And I always like highlighting the stuff that the general audience doesn't always get to see, or sometimes just completely oblivious about. There's so much that goes into all of this that it really should be talked about more. Because, like, yeah, man, loneliness sucks. That's not fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's good to highlight that. We do have a question from YouTube. Stephen Gerhardt.
Ooh.
He says, my Puget PC is currently in the install phase, and I'm super stoked. Outside of your creative software, is there any go-to apps you installed to help your pipeline?
That's an interesting question. I currently use Asana for my task management. I'm not using it for everything. Some people are like, I'm on Trello and I use it for everything. Like, I've tried Trello, it's cool. Asana, they're both free. They're just like task lists and stuff. I'm trying to consolidate. I used to use index cards, and those just get put everywhere, or task lists and things. So anyway, that's for kind of keeping things organized, especially if you have teammates or people, because then you can tag people and stuff. But let's see, what else do I use? Let me look at my computer. I actually have a really good backup system. Well, I don't have a really good backup system. Plenty of people have really good backup systems. I have Dropbox and Google Drive set up. So I have, what do you call that? Something? Redundancies? Redundancies
yeah,
set
that's
up.
it.
So I have cloud backups on multiple platforms. So if one thing has a problem, the other one hopefully catches it. And I still do hard backups. So things like that are important. Let's see. Let me see. What else do I use? I have little things, like little utilities, like my camera. I use a DSLR, and it's connected to my computer via some capture card stuff. And I have the EOS utility because it's a Canon camera, so I can adjust the exposure and the color temperature, so I can, change all these things just from my computer, so I don't have to mess with settings.
That's nice.
Really helpful. Saves a lot of time. Lighting. This is, if you go expensive, you can go to key lights and stuff like that, so you can, dim lights. If you go cheap, you can just get Home Depot lights and get yourself a switch or something. So I have little things like that. That's not really software. Well, it kind of is on the computer. I have audio stuff that's made my life easier, like for recording. Like I'm using a Go XLR, which is, again, a little bit more expensive, but there's other cheaper things. Like Elgato has some new stuff. I think there's technically like Banana Meter or something. Voice
Meter Banana. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a free version. It's just software based. So for me, I have sliders. So like my audio's on one track, and I can go, and adjust my volume. I can adjust other people. Anyway, I have things like that. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but I have a lot of like recording utilities, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Do you have like a tablet at all, like a Wacom tablet or any of that sort of deal?
Actually, I do. I have that on an ARM. So that's here. So yeah, I have that with a pen, so I can.
I think I can make you big. Maybe? No? I'll make just you. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see the...
Yeah, so this is super cool. This is really great for animation and for feedback and things. So all this is a monitor that you have. This is the mouse. That's all it is. It's just, this is the mouse and the monitor. I have a few other of these that are smaller, but this one's on an arm, so I can extend it, put it in my lap, make it really convenient and easy, move the monitor around. That's a tip that I would also say is if you have limited space, which most people do, monitor mounts are great. I discovered them like a year or two ago, and save so much room not having the big old, things on the desk. You just mount them and then you can move them. It's great.
Yeah. Especially when you have bigger monitors. Like one of mine is 39 inches, and so I have it up and away because it would take the whole desk. But yeah, that's smart. That's smart. Let's see. When it comes to educational content, how do you decide what to put out there? You did have some background as a trainer, so you got kind of some experience with that. But like now, you're a few years into this. How do you decide what you're teaching?
It's really hard, actually. When I first started, I just asked my growing community, like, what do you want to see? I just made those videos. It was pretty easy. I have a spreadsheet with tons of ideas from the community, which is important, not to just do everything people want you to do, but finding out like, oh, that's a good one. I do want to do that. But these days, it's actually really tough because there's a lot of stuff, especially education-wise, that like for something like animation that's so technical, there's tons of things that I'm like, oh, people need to know this. Like this is the the way to set up your shot and to do this right, to not have problems down the road as you're working on this thing, because animation takes so long. You want to set things up in a way that the computer does the work for you versus having to fight it all the way uphill. And there's so much to that conversation, but so many of those topics are not sexy to like click on for titles and thumbnails. So like there's a thing in Maya called setting your project, and it's about as exciting as it sounds. It's a 5-minute discussion that you have to show everything and explain why. But no one's going to click on that video. And of course you can clickbait it and say like, this is the Maya thing you need to be doing. But like that title's better saved for something more exciting anyways, where people are going to say, what is it? And then they click and you actually give them something exciting. And they're like, wow, this was great. Subscribe. If you have that title and they click on that video and they're like, oh, it's lame. They'll never come back. So you have to be kind of careful there. So what I've found is, I mean, in those types of situations, it's like there's a lot of stuff that I want to make, but I have to sort of play along with the whole YouTube and social media way of doing stuff. That, there's ways to trick it, or there's ways to get around that, where it's like, oh, okay, like 5 essential tips for my animators. Like I can make that tip number 3, bury it there in the middle where it's not super exciting, but it's just in there as a good tip. People go, that is useful. Okay. And it's in a way that they can accept because you've given them good stuff and you're going to give them better stuff. So as far as picking the topics, it's sort of a mix between like the problems I know I've had and the solutions I have found, or listening to the feedback and, we all don't know how to do this thing, or how do you do that? And then looking at myself and like, or if I run into an issue, I'm like, oh yeah, like there's not really a good place to find that answer. Like I should discover the answer and make a video about it. Sometimes it's a journey to discover like, what should I make based on my own research? Sometimes it's just, I know what to make. And sometimes there's people who are specifically like, I'll get a bunch of stuff that, everyone says, we all want to know how to do this. I'm like, I've never thought of that. That's a good one. Sort of a blend.
Yeah. Because I know if I were in your shoes, I have no idea. We do have another question from YouTube from Ones and Twos. They say, trying to learn Maya, do you offer classes? I've found a lot of content for Maya, but there seems to be a lack of long form, deep instructional content.
I sort of do. I kind of do an annual workshop. I'm thinking of doing one at the beginning of 2022, so I am probably going to do a big Maya thing. It's always very affordable. So at least I think it is. So, there's that. I am actually working on like official courses. There's a series I'm working on for Autodesk, which is going to be free on their channel, which is going to be really nice.
Oh, cool.
But as far as like a really big, deep thing, I don't know how like, it's not like a secret, but it's not super out there, but like it's just heads up, that's coming at some point as soon as I have some other pieces in place. But I am working on some deeper long form instructional stuff, but I don't really have a timeline on it. Probably maybe spring of next year. So, but if you are looking for more one-on-one stuff, I have Patreon. Well, I point down here because it's not one of my videos, but patreon.com/SirWadeFX, I think. Is that right? Patreon.
I didn't keep a whole list of all of you had so many links.
So many links. Is it just Sir Wade? I can't remember. Oh, it's just Sir Wade. Patreon.com/SirWade. Yep. I have a dailies thing where you can submit work and we do it feedback as a group and you can learn from people's stuff. I also have one-on-one mentorship there. So that's currently the way that if you were trying to learn Maya with me, that's through Patreon.
I will throw the link into the chat.
Thank you.
That's directly to Patreon. And then for other stuff, here is the
I have a Bentley.
The website direct. That's where you can find all kinds of cool stuff. The YouTube, the Patreon, the what do you got? You got Instagram, you got the Twitch live streams. That's super cool. Is that a newer thing?
Twitch?
Yeah, your Twitch, or was that from the start?
I think I started it like 2 or 3 years ago. So it's been a while. Funny thing, it's actually very topical to this. I started the Twitch live streaming because I was freelancing. Because I've completely forgot about this. Because I didn't have an accountability group or partner or anybody, I found it very hard to focus. I would get distracted, and I was working on like these, like I mentioned earlier, these really boring projects of like, oh, remove the staples and do this thing. And, it was work, but it was just boring, busy work. It was not my preferred skill set. And so I was just sitting there doing it. Like, this, my phone, waste time. Again, like not intentional or purposeful. And so what I did is I started live streaming on Twitch because none of the stuff I was working on for the most part was like NDA secret. It was just, just stuff. Yeah. And so I started live streaming that stuff because I figured whether I have 10 viewers, which I didn't, or one viewer, which is more likely, or no viewers, which is also very common at that stage. If somebody comes in and I'm scrolling on my phone, they're going to leave. So at the very least, I need to keep working, be productive. And so I started live streaming as a way to keep myself accountable to actually get the work done and be on it, which ended up being really, really helpful because I'd occasionally have projects like, oh, I have to use Substance Painter for this. I've never used Substance Painter. So I got the trial, started working in it. And I'm like, how do I do this? And lucky for me, one of the people in the chat had come. He was like, oh, Substance Painter. And they were coaching me through the chat, like how to do it. Like click on tools. Okay, tool. Oh, it worked. Hey, thanks. So I was actually learning from my Twitch chat, and that eventually grew into I was streaming 2-3 times a week. I've been on hiatus for several months, but yeah, it ended up being a really great tool for learning stuff.
Hey, that's neat. I love hearing that. It's that same kind of concept as like TikTok, right? A lot of people are like, oh, Twitch, it's just video games, blah, blah, blah. And again, so much cool content, really interesting and fascinating way of interacting with content creation. It's super cool. I like Twitch a lot. Yeah, it's cool. I wish, well, again, tangents that we don't need to go down. I wish I want to know more about kind of the business side of things. But I feel like I don't know enough to ask the right questions.
Give me like a topic. Like I'm down to talk about anything.
Well, I suppose you mentioned it was kind of the working with business to business. You needed like the insurance. What other things have come up representing your company and working with others that you maybe other folks don't really realize?
Well, would you like the answer based on freelance creative work or based on more like social media influencer type world?
Ooh, there's a difference. Okay.
Big difference. I'd say they're completely, yeah, they almost don't. Yeah.
Let's say from the freelance side of things.
From the freelance side, well, there is one similarity that goes for both, but they feel different. Very often, so there's the client, there's the person who needs the work done and they have the money. Mm-hmm. And then there's the artist who needs to do the stuff. And that can be both for a brand to an influencer or from a company to a creative, influencer freelance. And very often the creative person either doesn't have the negotiating skills, the business skills, could be the insurance, like it could be just like the connections, the networking, like how they connect to the brand is often up to just like luck if they, the person contacts them directly, which is very unlikely. But that sort of back and forth can be a whole thing. And so there's often some sort of an agency middleman.
Okay.
Whether that is for the freelance world, very often that was, my friend who did the freelance, he set up his own production company. And so the client, got the work from him, but he didn't have a certain skill set. And so hey, can you help me with this thing? And so he'd pay me to do the thing. And he was direct in the same way I'm direct now. But that he acted as my agency, sort of in that situation.
Okay.
But also for a lot of freelance stuff, that is a very normal thing that you have, let's say let's just say, for example, Disney wanted to hire freelance something, Disneyland needs a new logo or something, and they're going to freelance it for some reason. They will not just hire anybody. They won't go and find an individual and hire them. They won't do it. They have to have, like the insurance and stuff like that. But there are certain things that, like for Disney specifically, I know they require like certain security procedures and like different, I don't know, there's requirements. And so they need a reputable brand, a company to work with that they can go back and forth with. They can have budget discussions, they can do different things, and really that they can leverage to say, hey, like, we don't have time to look for people. We just want to hire you to get this done because we've got other things to worry about. Disneyland's a big park, blah, blah, blah. And so that agency will go and they'll find the people and they'll do the negotiate. So it's sort of this buffer where often you're not talking directly to the brand. You're talking to the whatever the middle thing is. And that's true in both cases. For influencers, you have the agencies, and then over here you have this stuff. And so you're often being kind of contracted out by something else, whether it's a studio or something. And I think that's the biggest similarity, but that's a very common thing. And so on one hand, it's nice because having that buffer, sometimes it's very cut and dry. And like, oh, like we have this budget, this is this, like, yes or no. And it's sort of just like, oh, cool. I don't have to like do the business stuff. I just have to say yes or no if I'm interested. Other times it does come down to like, hey, we want to give you $20. And you're like, okay, I do need to go negotiate. So it depends, but it's like pro and con. Sometimes it takes some of the work out for you because they take some of that work that the client may need done and you don't have to worry about all of it. And on the other hand, there may be pieces that you'd like to have more say in or more kind of creative liberties or control to say, oh, like I can totally do that logo for you, but I actually don't think that it should do this. Like, oh, we need that to be these brand colors. And it's like, the brand colors don't make sense. I don't know, just making stuff up, but
Sure.
but you can't talk directly to the client. They might be receptive to it, but you don't have access to them. You only have access to the middleman. And
Yeah.
and they're not going to pass that request on because they don't have time for you. So it's sort of this thing where, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's like a big business thing that I never knew going into it, is that,
Yeah. Because I would have thought that it'd be a lot more similar, like as an influencer or freelance. The perception, I suppose, is, well, what's the difference, right? But like somebody in the YouTube chat there, they mentioned it sounds similar to working with a third party recruiter. They they're like, hey, we have a client that's looking for this job to do. We think you'd fit. What do you think? And then versus applying directly and saying, hey, I can do that thing. I know you need that. It's that's interesting. So then as an influencer, is that, because I guess now you're not so much the freelance and independent in that sort of sense, as now a sort of influencer and then representing your own little business in that way. Do you then handle all of it, right? The negotiation and everything?
pretty much, yeah. I used to work with an agency. And when we first started working with the agency, it was really cool because I didn't know how to do most of that stuff. I kind of had an idea, like I've always kind of been around business, so I had some ideas for it, but I didn't know like what's my stuff worth? Like what do I pitch? How do I negotiate like numbers? Because I don't know what to charge.
Yeah.
And actually I have thoughts, which we should definitely talk about that at some point, which is like how to price yourself for freelance, because I have a formula for that.
That would have been my very next question, actually.
We'll come back to that then.
Yes.
In the influencer world, I didn't know so having an agency for a while, and kind of seeing how they did stuff and, seeing where their numbers aligned with what I thought or didn't align. And I learned a lot from kind of seeing that. I also learned a lot of what not to do. There was a lot of like dropped balls and communication issues that like, I had to basically do a lot of kind of cleanup, pick up the pieces work of like more, I mean, I don't know how to explain it without like giving too many details, but I guess the big thing is there's a inbound and outbound is a phrase you'll hear in the freelance world. Inbound work is something that comes into your inbox. Outbound is you are pitching people trying to secure a job, cold calling type things.
Okay.
That idea. And so working with an agency, you hope that they'll bring you stuff inbound.
Right.
Which is great because it's just, do you want to do this? Yes or no? Cool. When you have outbound, you take a risk if you are working with a third party, because you are putting your relationship with a company, brand, whatever, into the hands of somebody else and hoping that they don't screw it up, which usually they don't. But there can be situations where something happens, something gets miscommunicated. Sometimes it can go back on you because it's like the brand doesn't know that thing came from the agency. They think you're the one who asked for that or said that thing. And so then they're like, oh, we don't know if we want to work with this person. And then you don't know what happened because you're not on those emails. And so suddenly your connection goes away and you're like, I can't get a response from them. What's going on? But they don't want to tell you they screwed up. And so there is a risk with that kind of stuff. That's the kind of the dark side. That doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it'll be very impacting.
Sure.
I've had that a few times, and luckily in most cases I'm able to salvage it, kind of reach out directly and say, hey, just want to check in. And then sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we are the same. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's not, I wasn't involved in that. I'd love to work more directly with you. And so I'll kind of take it back. You hope that you're able to do that. Anyway, yeah, so there's a pro and a con to both of those things. The inbound work only comes in with an agency, but the outbound is also a risk. And usually agencies will want both. They won't want to just do inbound. They also want to, because they're a business too, they want the business that you can provide.
Sure.
So you have to decide for yourself whether that's worth it.
So then
I guess you're good at it.
Then, so because I know that this is something that comes up in all sorts of different creative avenues, is how much do I charge? And so you said you had kind of a formula for your own work at least, and I imagine it could help to give some insight for others.
Yeah, and I should really write
I
this
mean,
down so I can
I don't
share
know
it
if you
somewhere.
want to, like, if it's cool if you don't want to give the whole specifics of it, but I'm curious too, like how you how you built it, how you decided to come up with this framework for yourself.
Sure, I'm pretty open about it, so I don't mind sharing the pretty specific stuff. So as far as like so there's influencer and there's freelance, and they're very different. So influencers sort of based on like a combination of influencer sort of based is like, what's the general market like? Let's just say everyone's getting paid $100, and you're like, I want to be paid $1,000. Like, unless you have a really good reason why that is, like, there's really no way to justify it. That's not true for freelance. You can kind of charge anything. Like Super Bowl commercials cost millions of dollars. And so anybody who makes the content for a Super Bowl commercial, I'm sure they charge millions of dollars because they know the client has the budget. And that same work done for a smaller studio would probably not cost that much. But because they know they can charge it and they're going to get paid it, you change the price. And that's true to a point with influencer stuff. It's just sort of like based on how big your channel is. And that's, it's not really a thing until you're like massive, like someone like Casey Neistat or Peter McKinnon, or like a massive channel who's built their following and they're really good at what they do. They can charge the premium because it's proven that they're worth it. It's not just because like I have 100,000 subscribers now, I can bump up my prices. That's not really the case. It's really only when you've achieved a certain level of notoriety. But anyway, with the freelance, so that specifically is where I have my formula. That is the way I used to try and do it. Was I'd try to think in that context of like, oh, what are other people charging? Like I should probably charge in that. Like I was kind of basing it on like final price, project rate, or hourly rate. Like which one do I go with? And like what number do I choose? What are other people doing? And that was sort of how I was researching. And I never really found a good answer. There were websites, calculators, you put in how many hours you think it's going to take you, the type of work. It doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
So the way I've come to do it is, it kind of depends on your situation a little bit, of course, but at a base, I like to work backwards is kind of the way I would recommend people try to do it. So going from like full, like let's just say you quit your job like today, you have no income, and let's say your expenses are not that bad, hopefully, and you have the potential to get some gigs, and it's just like, okay, well, I'm gonna get some gigs. How do I price them? Work backwards from like, okay, like what do I need to survive? First of all, like let me do my budget. You have to do your budget. You have to look and say like, what's my rent? What's my utilities? What's all the things? Internet costs, blah blah blah. And you have to kind of split it to say like, what do I need to live? And then also I should include the others. Like, oh, I want to watch a movie every week. I want to do this. And so you kind of have an idea of like, your ideal monthly salary. You also have to add, whatever percentage for taxes, where you live, federal, state, wherever country you're in, those things. Ooh. In the US, it's really important too that you consider that if you are a freelancer, I think it's at the federal level, I forget if it's state or federal, I think it's federal level, 15% automatically added of taxes. So
for your self-employment tax.
Yeah, because because your employer, when you get hired to a company and you do a W-2, they're paying for like the Medicare, whatever, the
Social
Security,
Medicaid,
Social Security, all that stuff. And when you're working for yourself, you don't have an employer to do that, but it is required to have that paid into, which, feel how you will about that. So you have a big old chunk of taxes added on to whatever other math you have to do. So you have to add, like, in my case, I always say, add 35%. It's a little bit higher than the maximum bracket that you can have, because I think it ends up being like between state and federal and the freelance thing. It's like if you put 35%, I think you're 2 or 3% above the maximum of what you could have added on, I think. Okay. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I do, 35%, just to make sure I'm good. That way you do all your math of, this is my budget, this is what I need, and then this is like what I actually need because of stupid taxes and stuff. And no one likes taxes, no one likes paying, they're awful, freelancer stuff. And so you start there, and you also need to have two numbers. You need to have your big number, which is like, oh yeah, that includes the activities I want to do. And then you have to have your minimum. Like, I literally cannot continue to live unless I have a place to live and food to eat, and no frills, no Netflix subscriptions, nothing like that. But your software needs to be included in that. If you're using Maya, if you're whatever, your internet bill needs to be in there because you're communicating with people. So you need to have your kind of like, I need to be making this a month. I'd like to be making this a month. And so then you work backwards and say, well, how many hours am I going to work? And you give yourself, again, like work hours. I'm going to work up to 60 hours a week, up to 80 hours a week. 'Cause you're probably going to work more than 40 if you're doing freelance. You gotta hustle a bit. So give yourself like 80 hours of the month, divide that out, figure it out. Also consider, you just kind of do all that math and work backward and say, okay, realistically, like I need to be making at least are you working 10 hours a day? Are you working 5 hours a day? Are you whatever? Are the different things you do worth a different amount? So if you're like, I need my base rate to be X, whatever the math ends up being. Let's just say I need to be making $50 an hour for my lavish lifestyle, or I need to be making $20 an hour to be able to live, or something. I don't just
Sure.
and so when you're pitching a client on a project, if it's an hourly thing, you just tell them like, hey, like I need it, can you hit $50 an hour? And I charge a blank, hour minimum, because you want to make sure you at least get paid. You could do a day rate, you could do an hourly rate, you could do a project fee, like a flat rate, which is dangerous because what happens if it's like, oh great, this will take me like a month. Let's just do a flat rate of this and it covers your month. And it's like, great, like this is my monthly amount. It's going to cost you this. And they say, perfect. But then there are revisions and additional things and other stuff that comes up. And so then you end up 3 months in getting paid for 1 month of work and you have no time or bandwidth to do anything else. And you're like, oh crap. So first is kind of pricing things properly, making sure you're covered in those situations. The second thing is contracts, making sure you actually have things in writing that addresses revisions, that addresses additional stuff. I think I actually have a video on Freelance that if you go to my channel, that's when I talk about contracts in that video. But you have to, and one tool that people should look at is Calendly. It's just like a calendar scheduling thing. I use it for everything. It's free. I think I pay for an additional something with it, but I think at a base price, it's free. Calendly is the thing that, like, if I want to let people schedule time on my calendar, I sync it to my Google accounts, so it has access to my calendars, and then I can create different types of meetings to provide different links to. So like, I'm going to give you a 30-minute meeting link or a 60-minute meeting link, or I'm going to give you like a 15-minute consultation or whatever. And I can give each one different availabilities. These are only on Tuesdays. These are anytime, whatever. And what's really cool for freelancers is you can put a price on them. You can link it to PayPal. So if you have a client that you've completed your work for, and they're now starting to overstep, and it's like, hey, like, oh yeah, that's great. We actually, they could just email you and say, cool, great, like we want to pay you now, but they're not doing that. And they're trying to like, oh yeah, we have a couple more, maybe we could do another meeting, because they want to try and get more out of you and get you on the phone so that you'll be feeling weird to not say yes. But you want to make sure you get paid your rate or whatever, because they've already paid you and you're not getting paid more for this. So you give them a link and say, great, here's a 30-minute something. Feel free to schedule it whenever. The payment stuff's in there. And they cannot schedule the meeting unless they put the credit card information, it charges, and then they're able to schedule the meeting on confirmation. Like, oh, like this is charging. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just billing you for my, my additional time or something. And that way, even just those meetings, they are paid. That way they're not, taking up an hour of your time here, an hour of time there. It's like, nope, that stuff's extra.
That is a good thing, because I could see where that sort of creep could happen where, oh, hey, it's just going to be a 15-minute call. And it's like, I have 3 other projects I'm trying to work on, and that's eating. Yeah, that's smart. Really good little tip there for sure. Man, I would have never thought. Wow.
And also put some kind of like timer or something. Like you can use OBS virtual camera. You could like literally put a timer on your thing so that it's like ticking, and that way when it goes away, it turns red and it's like, oh, we're out of time, we got to go. Or, if you're bad at wrapping up meetings, or if you want, like I have that.
Nice.
So if I'm in a meeting and I'm like, oh, that's my meeting timer. So we got 5 minutes to wrap it up. Something that if you can't get a word in, you can like, trigger something, have something on screen, or even just like tell your mom to call you at 3 o'clock because you need them to stop talking to you at 3 o'clock or something. Whatever you need to be like, oh, sorry, I got to take this other business call. Schedule another meeting if we need more time. Pay me money.
A poignant subject, because it does bring us to, we are a little bit over our hour for our show,
which I don't mind.
Which and nor do I, but I do try to keep it to our brackets there. So we'll wrap it up here. But before we go, one final thing, 30 seconds or less, best thing someone who wants to do what you do can do for themselves to be successful.
You're talking about freelance stuff or influencer stuff?
Let's say influencer stuff.
Have a purpose of why you do it that's not money. If you are trying to do this type of, if you're trying to do anything on social media as like a job, people will see right through it if you're just trying to get it for views or money. You have to have a reason for doing it that's actually like meaningful to you. Otherwise, people won't buy into it and you will not be able to sustain it. So as far as influencer stuff and building a community, like I'm about helping educate people, making animation more accessible. I really believe in it. And so I'm able to actually put in the hours necessary to do it, where I've seen people try to replicate it, but they don't really, they expect success because that's what they're chasing. It doesn't come and then they drop off because they didn't really, and that's fine. But that's important. You need to actually want to do it, love what you do. Same thing with animation, like the stuff's tedious, the stuff's hard. It's not easy. If it were, everyone would do it. So everyone tries it, but not everyone succeeds. And so the other thing is patience. If you really do believe in it, then you have a reason to keep doing it, even if it's not quite working yet. So don't jump too early either.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us and taking, I know, some of your very valuable time out of the day to join us today. So I expect an invoice, I'm sure. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, thank you very much. This was really cool. And I think a lot of the advice and answers that we got today apply to more than just animation but to the broader sense of freelance and sort of influencer, social media, building yourself as a business, I guess, branding, that sort of thing. So I really appreciate the insight. I know I got quite a bit out of this myself, so I'm pretty sure the audience will as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. I never get to talk about this stuff. When I make videos about animation, we don't talk about the behind the scenes, so it's fun for me. And so I hope it did help people. I
want to do more of this sort of behind the scenes talk with others as well. I think this will be a good kind of start to just for people to know more about how the things that are being created get created and how it's not just I'm a success, so that'd be cool. And I also like to thank the audience as well for joining us. We do this on Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific time, where we have kind of a potpourri of external experts like Sir Wade here and our own internal experts like the labs team, Matt and Kelly and Don, and also we've also started to include our sales team and support as well. So make sure you mark your calendars for that. Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube or Twitch. And yeah. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.